All right, so have you ever been in like one of those D&D campaigns and you come across a monster and it's supposed to be super scary, but it just ends up being really, really funny?
Oh, yeah, totally. Like, sometimes those are the most memorable encounters, right?
Exactly. Like, so just the other day, my party was in this like creepy old mansion. Right. It was like totally cliche, like creaking floorboards and flickering candles and the whole 9 yards.
Oh, I love that.
Right. It was so over the top. But anyways, we're exploring this place and we come across a gelatinous cube.
Ah, the gelatinous cube. Classic.
Right. So, you wouldn't think that a giant blob of dew would be funny, but the way it like oozed into the room, just started swallowing everything in its path, furniture included.
Oh, wow.
It was just ridiculous. And we're all trying to figure out how to fight this thing while we're like dying of laughter.
I can only imagine how that like totally messed up your battle plan.
Oh, absolutely. We were so distracted. It was a mess.
Yeah.
But it was also like the highlight of the session.
See, that's what I'm talking about. Those are the moments that stick with you.
Totally. So, speaking of funny monsters, that's actually what our deep dive is all about today.
Oh, yeah. We're going to be looking at this really cool article from LitRPG Reads. It's called 7 D&D Monsters. So funny, you'll cry with laughter.
Nice. And it's written by Rich Hunterson.
Yes, Rich Hunterson. He's been a dungeon master for like over 20 years, so he definitely knows a thing or two about making players laugh.
That's awesome. For anyone who doesn't know, LitRPG Reads is like this amazing website for all things LitRPG. It's a genre that combines like the excitement of role-playing games with really immersive storytelling.
Exactly, and Rich Hunterson is like a master of that.
Yeah.
So in this deep dive, what we're going to be talking about is how funny monsters can actually like add a lot of depth and dimension to a D&D campaign.
Yeah, it's not just about like cheap laughs or anything.
Mhm.
It's about how well-placed humor can make the story better, create interesting challenges, and even get players more engaged.
Totally. Like you were saying with the gelatinous cube, sometimes those silly monsters can end up being the most memorable puss of the game.
For sure. Okay, so let's get into some of the main points from this article.
Okay.
So Hunterson's argument is that funny monsters aren't just about the humor. They can be great icebreakers for new players. They can create challenges that require creative problem solving. And they can even be used to reflect the humor that's already present in the world.
That's a good point.
Right. So like by adding in some absurdity, you're acknowledging that the world isn't always serious and grim. There's room for lightheartedness for the unexpected. And I think that actually makes the world feel more real, even if it's full of like owlbears and gibbering mouthers.
Yeah, it makes it more relatable.
Yeah.
You know, like real life isn't always serious either.
Exactly. So in this article, Hunterson gives us a whole lineup of monsters that he thinks are particularly funny. And he breaks down why each one have the potential to make you laugh.
Okay, cool.
So I picked out a few that I thought were especially interesting, and I wanted to dive into those a little bit deeper.
Sounds good. I'm curious to hear which ones you chose.
Well, first up, we have the Flumph. Have you ever heard of a Flumph?
I have, actually. They're pretty interesting.
So picture this. Okay, you've got this like floating jellyfish with gentle tentacles just bobbing around like it's lost in thought. But here's the catch. Flumphs are known for having an incredibly strong moral compass.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they're like the ultimate good guys, even though they look like something you'd find in a lava lamp.
It's that contrast that makes them so funny, right? This goofy-looking creature that's actually, like, super righteous.
I know, right? It totally subverts your expectations.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, they have telepathic abilities, so there's a lot of potential there for role-playing and storytelling.
Definitely. I'm just imagining, like, a party of, like, super jaded adventurers getting a lecture from this, like, adorable blob of light about their bad behavior. It'd be hilarious.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to another monster that kind of plays with your expectations, we've got the awakened shrub.
An awakened shrub. Now, that sounds interesting.
Right. It's literally just a shrub,
Yeah.
but it's a walking, talking, or I guess more like mumbling shrub.
Okay. That's kind of funny.
Right. And that's where the humor comes in. It's so unassuming, so seemingly harmless that it catches players off guard when it starts, getting involved in battles.
Oh, so it's like a walking sight gag.
Exactly. And DMs can use them in all sorts of creative ways, like to create diversions or to have them misinterpret commands or just to add some slapstick to a tense situation.
I like it. So what else is on your list?
Okay, so for a monster that's a bit more mechanically interesting, there's the Modron.
Ah, the Modrons. Their rigid logic and their like total dedication to order are always a source of amusement for me.
Right. It's like watching a clockwork creature try to make sense of the chaos of a typical D&D campaign.
Exactly. Like what happens when a Modron tries to organize a goblin market or enforce parking regulations in a dragon's lair.
Oh my God. That's amazing. It's like the absurdity just writes itself.
And that's what's so great about these funny monsters. They bring a whole new dynamic to the game. Players can't just hack and slash their way through a Modron encounter. They have to outsmart them, which can lead to some really funny role-playing moments.
Yeah, for sure. It's all about thinking outside the box.
Or,
All right, so we've talked about monsters that are funny because of the way they look or act. But what about a monster that's just weird? Like truly bizarre. I'm talking about the Flail snail.
a flail snail, oh man, those guys are something else.
Right. Just the name itself is enough to make you giggle.
So true. So for our listeners who haven't had the pleasure of encountering a flail snail, picture this. You've got this giant snail, right? And its shell is like shimmering with all the colors of the rainbow.
It's like a disco ball on steroids.
Yeah, exactly. But instead of just like gracefully gliding along, its tentacles are flailing all over the place like it's trying to conduct an orchestra or something.
It's hilarious. And Hunterson actually points out that despite its ridiculous appearance, the flail snail can be a pretty tough opponent.
Oh yeah, they're not all looks and no substance.
Nope. It's got a super tough shell, and those flailing tentacles can actually pack a serious punch.
So it's a real challenge for the party. Like, how do you fight something that's both hilarious and dangerous?
It's a good question. Do you try to dodge the tentacles and use its slow speed against it? Or do you try to like outsmart it somehow? Maybe use its chaotic movements to your advantage.
It really forces players to think outside the box.
Totally. Okay, so speaking of thinking outside the box, let's move on to a monster that's kind of become legendary in the D&D world. The Gazebo.
Wait, a gazebo? Like the thing you have in your backyard?
I know it sounds crazy, right? But trust me on this one.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So apparently the whole attacking gazebo thing started as like a miscommunication or a joke that just got way out of hand.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but the D&D community being the awesome imaginative bunch, they embraced the absurdity of it and turned it into a meme.
I love that.
And some DMs actually started putting animated gazebos into their games.
That's hilarious. It's like they took something totally mundane and made it into a source of humor and creativity.
Exactly. So imagine this. You're exploring a peaceful garden, everything is calm and serene, and then suddenly the gazebo in the middle of it comes to life.
And it tries to kill you.
Yeah, basically. Its wooden beams start creaking and groaning, and it's trying to crush your party.
That's amazing. How would you even fight a gazebo?
That's the fun part, right? Do you try to dismantle it? Do you use magic to, like, appease its angry spirit? It's a puzzle as much as a combat encounter.
I see what you mean. It's a great example of how a silly idea can lead to a really memorable and engaging D&D session.
And it shows how important it is to not take things too seriously.
Yeah.
Sometimes the best D&D moments are the ones that make you laugh the hardest.
So true. And that brings us back to one of the main points from the article, the importance of balance.
Right. You don't want your whole campaign to be a nonstop comedy show.
Exactly. It's about using humor strategically. Like, it's a spice that enhances the overall flavor of your campaign.
I like that analogy. You want to sprinkle in those moments of absurdity, those encounters with funny monsters to break up the tension, create memorable moments, and remind everyone that D&D is about having fun.
Yeah, it's all about finding that sweet spot between humor and seriousness.
Well, I think we've covered a good chunk of Hunterson's laugh-inducing monsters, and I gotta say, he makes a strong argument for embracing the power of funny monsters in D&D.
For sure. And I think we should give a shout out to LitRPG Reads for always putting out such interesting and thought-provoking content.
Yeah, they're a great resource for anyone who wants to learn more about LitRPG.
Absolutely. And of course, we can't forget our resident LitRPG expert.
Oh yeah, he's a walking encyclopedia of LitRPG knowledge.
He always knows the coolest stuff. Unfortunately, he's currently off on a quest of his own, exploring some new virtual reality game.
Well, we'll be sure to have him back on the show when he returns to tell us all about it.
But in the meantime, we want to hear from you, our listeners. What are some of the funniest monsters you've encountered in your D&D games?
Tell us about those encounters that made you laugh so hard you cried. Those creatures that defied all logic. Those moments that will forever be etched in your D&D memories as the epitome of hilarious.
You know, it's funny. As we've been talking about all these, like, wacky monsters, I've realized that they kind of act like a mirror. You know? Reflecting our own human nature.
Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more.
Well, like, take the Flumph, for example. With its silly appearance and its, like, super strong moral compass, it really challenges our tendency to judge a book by its cover. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's like a reminder that what's on the outside doesn't always match what's on the inside.
Exactly. And then you've got the Gelatinous cube, which, like, in all its absurd jiggling glory, it kind of highlights our own desire for more. Like our tendency to consume and accumulate.
That's a good point. It's like a funny exaggeration of that part of ourselves.
Right, like these monsters are poking fun at our human weaknesses and making us laugh at ourselves in the process. I like that. And I think that's part of what makes them so endearing. They're not just mindless monsters, they're reflections of us in all our messy, chaotic, and often hilarious complexity.
Yeah, totally. It's like a reminder that it's okay to not take ourselves too seriously.
Absolutely. A little bit of humor can go a long way.
For sure. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of funny monsters, I think it's important to remember that while they can bring a lot of laughter to a D&D campaign, they also serve a bigger purpose.
Right. They make us think differently, challenge our assumptions, and remind us that even in a world of like dragons and dungeons, there's always room for silliness.
And most importantly, they remind us that D&D is about having fun and creating stories together. And sometimes the best stories are the ones that make us laugh.
Well said. So to all the dungeon masters out there, don't be afraid to embrace the power of funny monsters. Get creative, experiment, and let your players experience the joy of encountering a creature that's as hilarious as it is memorable.
And to all the players out there, keep an open mind, embrace the unexpected, and never underestimate the power of a good laugh.
Because sometimes the most rewarding D&D moments are the ones that leave you in stitches, wondering how a game about rolling dice and fighting monsters can be so funny.
Absolutely. Until next time, may your adventures be filled with laughter, camaraderie, and maybe even a few flumps along the way.
Happy gaming, everyone.
See ya!